Um, I'm James Wilson from the IMS lab at BMC. I'm going to talk about some of our GUI features, particularly related to the catalog and managed ACB support. Lots of screenshots, lots of features to get through, and hopefully if we have some time at the end for maybe some questions, or if someone wants to see some more in-depth, like a live demo of anything, we can maybe start to get into those if we have time at the end. Here's the outline. It's just going to be a basic intro to some of the catalog features and in our methodology. Then I'm going to talk about some setup. There are a few features that to get the full benefit of them, there's some additional setup on our side, on the BMC product side, in order to take advantage of those. And then I'm going to go into just the features by category here. There's some of the routine, mundane type things that the features help enable, that are day-to-day, actions that you perform. Then there's a lot of reports and checking and verification type features that we have to help validate the catalog and managed ACBs, especially as you start to set them up. There's a lot of concerns and things that the product's able to help you accomplish in that avenue. And then I'm going to talk about just some of the generic ways to query and prod around at the new data sources that IMS offers with the catalog and managed ACBs, because they're new. So it's without some help, it's kind of hard to get just to navigate around and see what's inside of those new data sources. Okay, just a brief primer here. We probably all have seen this several times, but the catalog itself is a big, fairly convoluted LDB tree structure, and necessarily so, because any one of these links is a many-to-one relationship. So in order to accurately store all the data about the metadata for DBDs and PSBs, it needs to have this hierarchy established. And what you don't even see necessarily on the screen is each of these occurrences for any given object, DBD or PSB. You'll have multiple occurrences. So it's not just a matter of one-to-one. It's there's a header that says which one is the active one, and then there could be previous iterations of each one. So it's pretty complex to try and to use this directly. No, it's not there, for a user typically to manually query, but it's there to enable various features under the hood in IMS. But it is useful to be able to dig into it with your own tools, so that you can verify that it matches what you expect. And this is the new process, basically. So where we used to have a DBDGEN, PSBGEN, ACBGEN in IMS, now we have DBDGEN, PSBGEN, and then a new ACBGEN that actually populates the catalog in addition to generating an ACB. And now with taking on top of the catalog managed ACBs, there's an optional feature called DDL that is the next generation, essentially, of this process, where these multi-step gen processes will go away, and the DDL will be a one-time submit in order to add something to the catalog and the directories. And then at the end of these gen processes, in order for something to take effect, there's a new IMS Type 2 command called import definition. We'll cover the specifics of that later, but that's sort of the new way to do a change or a new object into an IMS. So about our products side of this, we have a primary product called BMC AMI Catalog Manager for IMS, which is not really a product. It's more of an offering, because there's no product license for it. It's just part of, if you have our existing IMS GUI, you have it automatically. It contains almost all of what I'm going to show today, which are these features that help navigate the catalog, managed ACBs, that new avenue in IMS. Anything that doesn't fit technically into the catalog manager, I will call out and indicate that if there's a license involved for that. Inside of our GUI, almost all of these will be under the tab that says Change Manager, but it's you'll see just a subset that is catalog manager if you're not licensed for the full Change Manager. Okay, so there's a few features that require some additional setup. So anything that communicates directly to the catalog uses JDBC, because that's sort of the proper way to access the IMS catalog. And in order to do that, we needed a secondary server that runs Java, because JDBC is a Java-based technology. It specifically is just these three, though. So we have these three. Spoofy is a generic. You can submit any SQL you want to your IMS system and see the results. We took the name exactly from the similar feature under the DB2 area, because it's just an SQL interface. The other is Catalog Explorer, which is just a specialized navigator for the catalog itself. Allows you to traverse those segments and see the objects as they were represented in the catalog HALDB. And then the third one is a generic graphical, kind of a DLI-centric explorer that lets you page through just segments based on criteria as DLI would see them. But aside from these three features, the rest of them don't require the JDBC, so they don't require this new server, ICM server. So this is some info about the ICM server. It's just a Spring Boot server. We ship it in this FMID CDLI 510. In order to build it, it's fairly straightforward, and there's sample procedures and sample jobs shipped with the product to be able to run these. One of the first of which is that you have to copy two files. There's a jar file for the server and a default properties file. And those just need to be copied to a ZOS Unix directory. And we have a sample copy job for that. The other is you need to assign a port to it in that properties file because it is a server, so it needs to have a port. And the third is SSL. If you ever run with SSL, there's some additional properties to set in that properties file in order to indicate the key store and all those SSL options that are necessary. And then since it's Java, there's a way to configure where Java exists on that system too. But that's about it. You can then just launch it as a starter task, and the GUI product will automatically use it under the covers. There's no need to explicitly connect to it via the GUI. It'll find it. Okay, so into those features here, we have this section is going to just be on some of the day-to-day, the new maintenance and cleanup type things that you do for the catalog managed ACBs. If you take a look here in our Change Manager area, you can see we have the Implement section, and under there we have a tab called Generate JCL Actions. That's going to launch a JCL generator, essentially, where you can choose one of these four. So we have JCL generators will generate JCL specific to your environment to perform these various tasks. DBDGEN, PSBGEN, and then the ACBGEN, catalog populate, and then the catalog purge. You can see when you choose one of them, it looks like this. It will give you a prompt, a form like this on the left, specific to that solution. So you can see with ACBGEN catalog populate, there's a few inputs that I can choose in order to tell it exactly what I want it to do. You can kind of see what it does over on the right with the control statements. Basically, I'm building that DBD, so it's build DBD equals. I chose to do all PSBs for this DBD, which is an option of the DFS3 UACB tool, which is just a build PSB equals yes. But the nice thing about these features is you don't have to remember all these control statements and additional parameters, and you can see all these archaic control statements that need to be passed to the utility. You don't have to remember all that because the JCL generator will have that baked in. And then the next step, just following that chain, when you go to put a new, when you go to perform a change, after you've done the catalog populate steps, get the directory and catalog built, there's the import command. We actually have a generic IMS commands function here. And lets you, it has the syntax, keywords, and help text built for every IMS command and every keyword associated with those commands. So you can see I'm hovering over the source catalog keyword here, and it says exactly what that means. So that's import defin source catalog with an optional name for which object you want to import. That's the command I would use to pull in my newly generated DBD into that system. And you can see if I choose a different command, I can select from any of these commands, and the form on the right will update to have all the appropriate keywords for that command. So this was just a query pool type DBAS command, which is the way you query the full function buffer pools. So again, things you don't have to remember. These are really kind of strange, non-human words that can be kind of tough to remember all of them. And so the feature remembers them for you. So that's all there really was for just the mundane, typical replacements for the old gen processes. Just some things to help kind of grease the wheels and streamline those things in the new world. We're going to get into more of the reporting and verifying features now. The first one is a kind of a family of products, a family of features called the database integrity features. And those are they're old features with the old library management functions such as DBDLib, PSBLib, MDALib, all of those libraries. We've just enhanced them so that they can read the directory as well on top of just the old libraries. And the three main types of reports are the cross-reference, the compare, and the detail. Cross-reference is just literally finding things that point to other things. So for every DBD, show every PSB that references it, or vice versa. For every PSB, show all the DBDs it points to. Same with DD, name, and DBD. So you can help find if something's not directed toward some other object that you think it should be, that kind of thing. And then compare is just to detect changes. So you can compare the active versus the staging ACB to see what changes have been imported, or what stages will be imported if you do an import from staging, those kinds of things. And then detail is self-explanatory. Just drill down into one object and show every detail you can about it. So this is kind of what they look like. We have the three main categories are on these tabs here. And then once you choose one of them, you can essentially change all of the types to determine which objects to report on. So here I'm starting from the Active Directory, and I'm cross-referencing for any given PSB or ACB in this case, because it's an ACB library. I want to find all of the DBDs that it points to. And so I just filled in a prefix here. I wanted all the PSBs that start with the letter D. And I click display, and it gives me this big collapsible table. So each individual ACB gets an entry. Underneath that is a table of all the DBDs that it points to. And the same exact thing works in reverse. It would just be DBD name, DMB names up top with ACB names underneath it, and so on. That's kind of how cross-reference works. And I can choose staging just as easily as active here. Compare is just shows the same report that the old utility did. I choose which type of thing to compare to. So I say start from the Active Directory, compare it to some arbitrary other ACB lib. Maybe this is the ACB lib I typically do my DFS3 UACB gen to, maybe, wherever that is. Maybe it's the old ACB lib before I started implementing the catalog, whatever, and compare the two. The first thing you'd probably want to look at is the timestamp. So in my case, they're the same. Oops. In my case, they're the same. So, that's probably what I was expecting. I generated it to one and wanted to make sure that it made it into the directory. So you can see that the library names, which it comes from, are right at the top there. And then object detail. So this is just to drill down. So taking a DVD from a certain ACB lab, it gives me just a big report with all of the data about that object. So the type of DB, the date and time of the gen, the organization, if it has any logical relationships or secondary indexes, and et cetera. And you can see the scroll bar is pretty big over on the right. It just gives me a breakdown, everything I want to know about that object. Okay, so we're going to get into some more, a little bit more interesting and catalog specific features here. So I mentioned earlier that the catalog is kind of a big and convoluted data structure. It can be pretty tough to kind of mine the data in that catalog because there are so many segments. It's hierarchical, and there's previous iterations of each object. So to show an example of how you would access this with out-of-the-box tools, this is a DLT0 job to do a get unique record call to the header record of the catalog. Get unique record is a special call that accesses a certain root and all of its dependents. So this is going to give me the DBD named, cust HDAM of a specific timestamp. So I've already somehow isolated which timestamp I'm interested in. So this doesn't come for free either. You'd have to find which object, which instance of that object that you're interested in. If you didn't have this, it would just give you every DBD named, every occurrence of that DBD. So you've already done some work here ahead of time, and we do this DLT0 job, and we end up with a big XML document. So you can kind of tell this isn't meant to be human consumable. This would be something probably a tool would use. You could send this at least to an XML formatter and then have a readable XML document, but it would even if it was formatted nicely, this would still be pretty rough to try and glean anything useful about unless you really knew exactly one field you were interested in or something. So we built features that help drill into this with a lot easier point and click kind of interface here. So the first one's Catalog Explorer. So you see this is under the same area where the Change Manager features are, under the Diagnose Explorer section. So I click Catalog Explorer. I'm given a choice of the IMS Connects, because remember this is a JDBC interface that it's going to use. So I need IMS Connect and ODBM present to access it. So I choose my system. I'm given a list. This list is only giving me the active copies of every matching DBD. So you can see up here I filled in a prefix DFSC. So I want only the databases that start with DFSC. For me, that's only really the catalog databases. But the important thing is this is the only the active copies of everything. So if I click on list PSB for any one of these, I'm then given another prompt, optional prompt, if I want to filter down further, or if I just want all of them. If I leave it blank, it will just give me every PSB that points to that DBD. So again, this is going across the cross reference. There's a special segment in the catalog called DBDXREF, and it will automatically bridge that gap. So it's a secondary index that points to the PSBs from the DBDs. And the important thing is that it matches the timestamp for you. So I'm only now looking at the active copies of all of these PCBs that live in that PSB. I can page back and forth too. So I see up on the top here, there's kind of a breadcrumb trail. I can page back to the PSBs and do a different search if I wanted to. So it's kind of a much quicker way to get useful information out of the catalog, particularly for crossing that cross-reference bridge and for isolating it down to only the active copy of each of these objects. Okay, the next feature is the data explorer. So this is it's more general purpose because it's not just for the catalog, but it is kind of DLI based, that's what I call it, because it lets you essentially do page through segments in a get first, get unique, get next kind of method. So you see I've chosen a very simple database in this case, just has a root, but if it had more, there'd more of a tree structure down here. Similarly, I choose my IBM and my IMS Connect right up here on the top, and then I can search for DBDs by filling in a search argument here, and I can load a given DVD by clicking that button. And then that'll display the hierarchy. Once I click on one thing in that hierarchy, I'm given a table with the actual fields from that segment. And I can add a qualification, just like in DLT0, where you can add criteria to a given search argument. I can do the same thing here. So I add a qualification. Now I have a select filter for the root key bigger than 1, 2, 3. And you can see down here, down in the results, that it's reflected. So I've got the next key, which is 1, 2, 4. So this is a much more flexible, but it's also a little bit more raw. It's just going to blindly give you the segments in the fields that match your criteria. If you have multiple levels, it'll just give you those segments one on top of the other, just right down like a hierarchical path. So again, really powerful, but very generic. Okay, and then before I get into the final one, because the final one is probably the most sophisticated, I wanted to go into the decode function. So we have a function called decode, called disassemble in the GUI. Same thing. What it lets you do is take a generated object from anywhere that it can live. So that's DBD line, ACB line, the catalog itself, the HALDB, or any of the directories. And then you can produce the gen or DDL syntax that produced that object. This can be really useful for just determining whether something made it, the timestamp and the features, the flags, the things you're going to look for are present in a given object. So there's no truer source than taking the object itself, wherever it's supposed to be, generating out those control statements that produced it. It has the basic functionality is all tied into the GUI, so you can disassemble various things directly from the GUI. But there are some more advanced features that are available only in a batch decode job, and I'll cover some of both of these. One of which is the import command. There's a way to actually take the decode, and as you're decoding, incorporate COBOL and PL1 copybooks into the segments so that the catalog can know about them. That's one of the requirements for the catalog. Any field that you want the catalog to know about, meaning any field you want exposed to Java, for example, needs to be present in a field statement in those DBDs, which is not typically how things were done in the past in IMS. So I'm going to cover some examples of this. So in the GUI, this feature is actually under the advisor area, but it's not part of the advisor product license-wise. It's just part of what's called the DBA toolkit. So again, it's a free offering. I can select a given DBD. There's a quick access link on the right called disassemble. I can click that. It takes me to this screen. And this is where I can fill in the basic functionality here. So which source, where do I want to pull that object from? In my case, again, it's the Active Directory. And then you can choose whether to do, choose the object, the member name, of course, and then choose whether you want DDL. In this case, I'm doing DDL, so you can see the syntax comes out like that. This is that same DB I showed earlier, so you can see it's just a root-only DB, and you can see the same field names we were just looking at. it's more than just DBDs and PSBs. By the way, you can do MDAs or ACBs, and actually there's MFS as well, but that's off the scroll here. So this is just a different example, a different of when I choose. PDL is no, so it's going to give me the gen syntax for that same DB. If I choose an ACB lib, I can have this option on the next to the type to say detect what type it is, because ACB lib is where both DBDs and PSBs will end up living. So rather than having to remember which one it is, the product will figure out which one it is. Okay, into the more advanced features here of the decode. Here's an example of importing copybooks. So you see here, I'm doing a decode with a mask DVD, all the DVDs that start with M. In my case, I'm taking the source as is the IMS DD. This might be something you do as you're migrating to the catalog, for example. Decode everything from your current source of truth, which is really your DBD lives, PSB lives, where they live currently, and then populate a whole PDS full of their source code. And you see in my case, I'm doing the import and onExist. So import means I want to import copybooks from, there's this DD IXPC1. And that's where my copybooks are. By default, the copybook name just matches the segment name, but that's something that can be controlled as well. So then any copybook it finds that matches, it will take and import those fields into the DBD. OnExist means if there's already a field with the given name, it will update it to match the copybook if it doesn't match already. So these are the sort of basic controls in order to generate that source. I'm sticking with DDL no, because to get to the catalog initially, you don't need to have DDL right away. You can wait to go to DDL.
James, we have a question in the chat.
Okay.
If we can interrupt. So I think the question is, can we do a mass produced DDL for all the PSBs and DBDs? I think for an example, let's say a particular shop has 10,000 DBDs and 50,000 PSBs. As a one-time process, they might want to, convert everything into the DDL source form, because going forward, they will be submitting DDL to make any changes. So the question is, can they do a mass produce of, these DDL statements from the DBDs and PSBs?
Yes, you sure can. So that's exactly what this would do. If I take away if I just want every single object, I can do star right here. So I would decode DBD asterisk source wherever you want to pull it from, whether it's what's in the catalog, source catalog, or an ACB lib, source IMS ACB, and put the IMS ACB as a DD name. And then DDL, yes, that'll make all of the decodes into DDL. So yeah, that's a pretty straightforward thing to do with this particular tool.
And James, you think that would be required by every customer, right, to convert this one time, all the existing DBDs and PSBs into an equivalent DDL source form?
Well, yeah, not even getting to DDL yet. I think the first thing, just to get to the catalog, you'd probably want something like this, unless you're very sure that your source that you have saved somewhere is exactly the source you want to funnel in. So that's why I would start with something like this: decode DVD, your old, either the ACB lib or the DVD lib, whatever you trust is the real thing you want to pull in, decode it like this. And then if you want to go into the catalog and take advantage of the catalog, also do the import so that you're pulling in your COBOL copybooks at the same time. That's the recommended approach when you go to the catalog, is to enhance the DVD source to have all of its fields. And that's what this tool helps you do. But yeah, once you want to go to DDL, you would I would think you'd do the same thing, but maybe not necessarily all at once. You'd probably maybe pick a family of DVDs that you want to convert, and then do the same kind of thing, but you wouldn't then need to do the import again. You could just do the same kind of decode after it's been enhanced. You'd probably go source catalog or source from an Active Directory, and then DDL yes, and that would get you the converted source code that you can then start to work with.
Right. And one thing which is definitely changing, James, in my opinion, is today if you have to make any, let's say, schema changes, You have the entire DBD source and you make changes in that DBD source. You do the DBDGEN, ACBGEN, and you go that way. But I
Mhm.
think when eventually you will go to DDL, it will be more of alter statements, which will only include the changes you are doing. You will not be having the entire thing visible in front of you. So I think
Mhm.
having DDL sources, entire sources would be handy eventually when people
Yes.
will move to DDL.
Yes, exactly. And even once you already are fully DDL and you've been doing alter statements to doctor the DVDs how you want, add columns to them, whatever you want to do, having a way to decode what is there now, so
Right.
that you can decode DDL yes. So whatever alters have been applied to it, now give me the full set, so I have the whole picture. Yeah. So yeah, there's some challenges as well as the benefits of DDL once you get to that final step.
I
Okay.
think that answers the question. Thanks, James.
Okay, sure. So just to highlight, this was the controls that point to the DD and which objects I want to pull in. And then the import is this IXB-C1. This was a DD that was mirrored from a product called FileAid, so any customer that's familiar with that wouldn't be too surprised. And this is when I said it could be controlled manually. This is what I was talking about. There's another DD you can provide for XREF control, and that lets you explicitly say, okay, don't use just the raw segment name. I want you to say, take for this DBD, this segment, use this other copybook. So you can do it. You can do it all manually if your names just don't line up 100%, and it will take that as the winner. And the last way is again from FileAid. Um, the FileAid product has this concept called XREFs, which some customers have already built, and those actually contain a dictionary themselves of DVDs, segments, copybooks, all the way down to actually an optional O1 level. So if you can have one copybook with a different O1 level for every individual segment. And so if you have those, you can provide it in this DD IXBFD, and then we will automatically read the XREF as the first source. The XREF control to override anything that doesn't quite match will be the final arbiter, but anything not present there, the XREF will be used. So there are many ways to get there. The simplest is just the DVD name and the segment name matching the copybook, but if that can't quite work out, you can always take control manually. Okay, that was it for decode. The last one for the catalog features was the spoofy feature. So it sounds pretty simple. It's just a SQL interface. Once you choose your ODBM and your IMS Connect, you can manually type in some SQL, execute it, and see the result. But we've enhanced it quite a bit. So we have access to the schema entirely from the catalog. So we took and added what's called an SQL generator tab here. So you can actually build your SQL with a drop-down selection list instead of having to remember field names and get the commas in the right place and everything like that. So you can see down here, I've built out some by selecting my various tables and clicking the checkbox next to the fields that I want. And it's giving me a little color-coded box here that shows me all the fields grouped by the segment that they came from, and color coded for the segment, and then it builds out the SQL query for me at the bottom as I go. And if once I'm happy with that query, I can just click the copy to editor, and it will take me to the editor. The other part is this search by field. So this box right in the middle, search field by description. Right now we only have descriptions and remarks built in for the IMS catalog, but we are looking at enhancing that to pull in if there's remarks on a given object, or we may even provide a facility of our own to kind of tag columns and fields with some documentation of your own. But the idea is I can search for things. If I don't remember the exact field and what it means, if I have the remarks, so I just remember I want the randomizer, but I don't remember the column name for it. I search for this, randomizer, and it finds it in the comments. So if that's the one I wanted, I could then just click it and add it to the query. But then, yeah, once I click that copy to editor, it will just funnel it into the the main screen, so I didn't have to type this out all manually. So I really like a guided interface here to build out SQL, without typing it all by hand, because there's just too many errors, and you'd have to have, two screens open, one for the SQL and one for the schema that you wanted to query. So wanted to give some more guide rails to someone trying to use this. Anyway, that was it. That's all of them. Did we have any more questions?
James, we only had one, but I have one. Do you want to share anything about our recent enhancement related to catalog synchronization report? This is too early.
Yeah, we weren't quite ready for that one yet. Yeah, it's we do have another report we're just finishing up right now. But yeah, it's called the catalog synchronization utility. And what it does, I can at least talk about it, is it will take the IMS catalog, Active Directory, staging directory, and search it for anything that's out of sync. So think of all the ways that things could somehow mismatch. In theory, it will never happen, but there's a lot of things, and especially in IMS over the years, that should never happen, but sometimes things will go awry. So imagine you have something in staging, but no such thing in active. That's valid. That just means it's a new DBD, but it might be useful to see that. Similarly, if you have something in the active directory, but you don't have a header segment for it, that's something that should never happen. But if it does, you definitely would want to know about it. Also, the timestamps. So if you had an active directory member whose timestamp is older than the header records timestamp indicates, that would be like an out of date type of object. So it just goes through, matches that every object exists in the places where it needs to be, and that the timestamps make sense. And if it's, it could be valid, but something valid but interesting, you might say, like the staging object with no active. Or it could be something that's invalid, so you definitely want to know if something's orphaned or if it's some out of date from what it really should be. So it's just a batch tool, and see more about that in our disclosures once we finish it up.
Okay, James, thanks. I think we don't have any question in the chat, but obviously if you have any question, you can speak now, or you can also send us your questions later on and we can try to get back to you. And as we are doing in all the other webinars, we will be following up with the, the recordings and the link to the PPT. So you can go through again, and if you have any question, you can reach out to us. Just the following thing, that we have the 6th webinar coming up on 18th of September, and it's going to be the last session of this webinar series, where we are going to talk about a little automation that we have built using Ansible to convert your existing IMS systems from DBD Live, ACB Live environment to IMS-managed ACB. And then in the end, we'll be taking some Q&A, and we'll probably come up with some predefined questions to answer as well. So yeah, looking forward for the next session, which will be the final one in the series, and we'll be sending the registration links shortly. So again, thanks, James, for taking out time and doing this session for all of us. And I am pretty sure it is helpful and it will be useful for all the IMS community across the globe.
Yeah, sure. Happy to share. Thanks for organizing everything.
But thank you, James.